Welcome to the channel. I'm James Salvatore, and next to me is the all-new 2022 Mercedes EQS 580 4Matic. And this is a very important car for Mercedes because it represents a lot of firsts for them. Mercedes is very new into the electric car game, so I feel like they're doing a lot of experimentation. You can see that the design here is completely different from the traditional S-Class, which is going to be produced alongside. Mercedes has decided to completely separate their electric model lineup from their traditional model lineup, kind of to almost see which one takes off, if you might say. So in today's video, we're going to go over the features on the EQS, and then I'm going to drive it, share my thoughts on it. So let's get right into the video. On the exterior, you could see the front end features a fully unique glass grille panel with a continuous LED daylight running light running the span of the front end. It has dual permanent excited synchronous motors producing 516 horsepower and 631 foot-pounds of torque with a 107 kilowatt-hour battery mated to a single-speed transmission with 4Matic all-wheel drive. It's good for 0 to 60 in 4.1 seconds, and it can charge from 10% to 80% in just 31 minutes on a direct current charger. And it takes 11.5 hours on an alternate current charger to reach a full charge. It has fully adaptive self-leveling air suspension and 10-degree rear axle steering, making for an impressive steering radius. And it starts at $119,000 with 3 trim levels of the 580 available. Sitting in the EQS feels very familiar and both completely different at the same time. It's very cool. As soon as you sit down in here, you're instantly overwhelmed by the 54-inch, what Mercedes calls hyperscreen infotainment system. It literally simply is the largest infotainment screens in the business right now. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. It overtakes the whole car, and it's really cool. There are some familiar elements, like say the steering wheel and some of the switchgear in other cars, but other than that, this interior really does feel very different in a good way. Let's dive into the details. Let's start off with the driver's information center. So one cool thing that Mercedes does is there's 2 pads on the wheel. So you never have to take your finger off the wheel. The left pad controls the driver's information center, where you could choose between various different gauge designs. You can have full navigation, full assistance features. There's plenty to choose from there. I mean, like, it just looks really cool. The graphics are state of the art. Honestly, just simply some of the best in the business, period. I mean, just look at how clear and just nice and appealing those look. But moving on to the main functionality of the screen, you can see this is very large. I mean, Mercedes has spent a lot of money on this. You could just tell because the graphics are just so good. I mean, just look at that, and look how quick the map renders. I mean, this is just really good tech. Mercedes has done a great job with this. And one of the cool things is, since this is an EV car, they have an EV menu where you could see parking spaces that are close to charging stations. You could plan your routes. You could see what your range is, how long you have until you're fully charged, your average consumption. This has one of the most interesting cameras in the business, period. I mean, just take a look at how good this camera is. You could scroll around kind of at will, zoom in, zoom out. You could still see this in the normal S-Class, but it's just done so well here, honestly. And another thing to note is you do have wireless Apple CarPlay in this car. And I have to say, for wireless Apple CarPlay, this has to be one of the most lag-free experiences I've ever had. I mean, just look at how fluid this is. Although I do think that they should have maintained physical buttons for the climate control. I mean, it's not bad to use, but I feel like for some people it may just annoy them having to look down at the screen. But you can tell the virtual assistant to actually change the temperature for you, so I guess things kind of cancel out there a little bit. And as you can see on the center console, we've completely departed from Mercedes touchpad / rotary wheel design. That's completely gone now. You just have a few vehicle functions down here, and up here you have wireless charging. All right, I just got to address this one thing though. I don't know what they were thinking when it came to the rear seat experience in the EQS. This is an S-Class branded product. The standard car has an amazing rear seat experience. In fact, it's world renowned. The S-Class stands for the ultimate symbol of luxury, and sitting back here, I'm kind of cramped. Like, yes, I have enough knee room. You know, I have my seat set up like when I was driving, and I'm 6'1", so yeah, there's a good amount of leg room, but I have little to no headroom. This swooping like roof line completely cuts into headroom, and I don't know if they're going to do adjustments maybe on the door. You know, this is a lower trim model possibly. As I said earlier, there's 3 different trim models, but there's no adjustment in the seat, and you're like left sitting upright, and the cushions are kind of hard. Like, I sat in both the standard car and this car back to back, and that has to be my biggest gripe about this new EQS. I hope that Mercedes addresses that in future models. When it comes to cargo capacity, I'd say it's pretty good. You get 22 cubic feet of cargo storage with the seats up, and if you put them down, you have up to like 55, 56 cubic feet of cargo space. Pretty good, and the hatchback design makes loading things very, very easy. All right, now we're driving the EQS, and a lot of you probably right now are saying in your heads, James, how does it compare to the Porsche Taycan? And my answer to that is it just simply doesn't. Just get that out of your head right now. I've reviewed every trim level of the Porsche Taycan, and it is by far the best performance electric vehicle on the market. And if you're thinking of considering one of those, I have plenty of videos on all the Taycans, as I said, so be sure to check them out. Scroll through the channel, browse, you'll see those. Okay, now back to the EQS. This is the best luxury EV on the market. This isn't supposed to compare to a Taycan. Just because they're electric vehicles, do you compare every gas vehicle to one each other? No, they serve very different purposes, and this makes it clear right away. The ride comfort is exactly what you've come to expect from an S-Class product if you're already an S-Class customer. That is the same. The acceleration is extremely smooth. Off the line, I mean, there's no interruptions where you'd have gear changes. I mean, in a normal S550, S560, S580, if you're coming from one of those, you're already used to a very smooth car. Having electric motors definitely takes it up a notch. I mean, there is no hesitation when taking off. It is completely smooth. You barely feel it. I mean, it's right there. It's right away. It's effortless. You have the same amount of torque you're used to with the V8s, so you're not going to be missing out on that effortless acceleration from a standstill with barely any throttle applied. One of the things that I would say is something I'd have to get used to if I actually got one of these would be the brake feel. The brake pedal's definitely doing a lot of funky things. Like, you know it's doing more, you know, because it has regen brakes. You know it's doing more than the typical normal car is doing, but it feels very disconnected. Now, if you're coming from an S-Class 4-door, you may not notice as much the loss of noise because those cars are actually very quiet. I would say you wouldn't really be missing the noise much. Now, if you're like me and you're coming from an S-Class coupe and seeing if this is a viable replacement for that, you're definitely going to miss the noise, but there's no doubting that this does have enough performance to make you happy. I mean, you could see it just picks up and goes right there. Nose lifts right up. It's very satisfying acceleration. From the standpoint of visibility, I would say the visibility in this is pretty good overall when you look out the hood and the sides of the car. The rear is a little bit difficult to see out of, but isn't the end of the world because you have so many safety assistance systems in this car. You know, you have your blind spot monitoring. You also have adaptive cruise control that has been extremely advanced for this car. Okay, now we're going to see just how this does. Can you drive this car spiritedly, and will it actually be a good time? How much does the suspension firm up? Is there a lot of body roll in the turns with this? The standard S-Class, the 4-door at least, has a pretty good amount of body roll in turns. And, it doesn't make for very spirited driving, but that's not the point of that car. So, let's see what this could do. Yeah, it's definitely quick. Yeah, there is a lot of body roll with this. So one area I'd like to see Mercedes experiment a little bit with this car is the noise. So Porsche has like this cool like futuristic noise, and they've tried to kind of do something similar too with this. You listen, it's like this whooshing sound. It's kind of random. I think for a company that makes some of the best sounding engines that have ever been created, period, they should try to replicate that noise in this car. I think it's totally possible. I mean, they even have paddle shifters on the steering wheel still. Why not make it kind of like a game, you know, make it fun? I know that this is the S-Class and that's not the point of it. I'm just saying that for maybe future Mercedes EVs that they experiment with putting AMG sounds in it. You know, just a thought. Mercedes, if you're watching this, coming to a stop and accelerating, it's just so extremely smooth. It's so much smoother than the V8 ever was. When you're driving this in comfort mode, this is definitely superior to the V8 in terms of just how smooth it is from takeoff, the effortless acceleration. It's there. I mean, you barely have to touch the throttle for it to go anywhere. I mean, there's so much torque. All right, let's get a little acceleration in, shall we? It's definitely quick. It definitely is. I think that the acceleration is definitely like adequate. It definitely matches up to the standard S580 with the V8's acceleration. I think it's right on par. This definitely needed more power than the standard S-Class because it's heavier to have similar performance, and I think they've achieved that here. Like I said earlier, it's definitely not Porsche Taycan fast, but it's not supposed to be. All right, now let's get down to the breakdown. The good, the bad, and do I recommend the EQS? I'd say the good of the EQS is I think that they've managed to create an electric platform, power plant wise and suspension wise, that lives up to what you expect in an S-Class product. The power is good, the torque is good, it's definitely good on power. You know, you're not going to feel like this is a slow EV. Or S-Class for that matter. I really do feel like it's the same amount of punch in the back, the same amount of, like the way the torque hits as the V8. I think styling is definitely subjective. I personally do prefer the styling of the standard S-Class, but once again, that's up to everybody's opinion, so we're not putting that in the good or the bad pile. Definitely one of the negatives was the back seat. If you're going to be somebody, like I said earlier, that you're going to be driven around, this isn't a car that I'd want to spend my time in the rear seats in. I think one of the positives when it comes to tech, this definitely has one of the most impressive infotainment systems on the market, period. And wireless Apple CarPlay and smartphone integration is as good as you could possibly want for 2022 standards. So what I'm taking out of my experience with the EQS is this. Mercedes is in a very experimental point in their history. They have to soon adapt all their products to be fully electric, and they're experimenting right now. That's the reason why they're keeping all their electric vehicles separate from their traditional model lineups, because they're trying to see what's going to work, how customers are going to respond. Will they like these designs or will they favor the more traditional designs? So this is a funky period. You're either going to really enjoy this and this is going to be the car for you, or it's just really not. However, if you're looking for a luxury EV experience only and it must be electric, this is definitely one of the best choices, if not the best choice, period. Especially compared to the Tesla Model S, this is just a better car in my opinion. The Tesla Model S, yes, is way faster. It really is faster, especially with the new Plaid. It just depends what you're looking for. But if you're somebody who's looking for an ultra smooth, ultra comfortable luxury experience with some of the best tech on the market, this is a tough act to follow. but there's going to be a lot of controversy surrounding this car, I think, you know, with traditional S-Class owners deciding whether or not to move on to the EQS. And I think, you know, Mercedes has made a really good first step with the EQS, but I think they have a few design changes and a few changes to make in general before they will win over the majority of their S-Class owners, or the majority of their S-Class buyers, to the electric platform over the traditional platform. Well, that sums up my thoughts on the EQS. Love it or hate it, the EQS is a very interesting car, and it's not going to be for everybody. I think that this was a very good step into the electric car game for Mercedes overall. Before we go though, I'd like to remind you all to hit the like button, subscribe, turn on that bell notification so you don't miss out on next week's video, especially if you enjoyed this one. And before we go, I'd like to say a special thanks to my friends down at Mercedes of Fairfield, Connecticut for making this video possible. They're an awesome, super helpful, friendly group of people to work with. And if you're in the market for a new Mercedes, especially an EQS, be sure to give them a call. I'm going to leave their contact information in the description below so you can do so. And with that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next video.